good evening, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Mandy Sanchez tonight, Programming Director for Culture Reframed. Dr. Mandy Sanchez has been researching, writing, educating, and presenting about pornography and violence for over 20 years. She specializes in domestic and sexual violence, the intersectionality of gender, sexualities, place, and trauma, and justice involving women and children. Dr. Sanchez is a trained trauma-informed facilitator, and as the Director of Programming for Culture Reframed, she focuses on expanding, developing, and ensuring high-quality, comprehensive, impactful programming for parents and adults who are influential in young people's lives. Mandy, a very warm welcome to you. We're so looking forward to your presentation. If you just want to share it and we'll get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. And thank you so much for inviting me and having me here today. So I'm going to talk to you about what it's like to grow up in a porn culture with all of the social, emotional, and cognitive effects of porn exposure on young people and provide you with a public health solution. So I'm going to start out with a trigger warning today because I'm going to be presenting information about sex, hypersexualization, pornography, and sexual assault. I will use graphic language, text, and images throughout, but no pornography or pornographic images. So I'm asking you to view at your discretion, especially those who come in looking at this recording later. And self-care is highly encouraged. So take a walk, take a breath of fresh air, but really take care of yourself afterwards. The girls these days just seem to come to the set porn ready. This is a quote from pornographer Joanna Angel in an article that discusses how the internet is changing teen sex. Our image-based culture is socializing young girls to be ready for pornography, whether they ever end up on a porn site or not. They are being taught to hypersexualize and pornify themselves. Today's young people have grown up with normalized images of women in lingerie, like here at the last Victoria's Secret's fashion show. The theme for females is white, blonde, toned, poreless, blemishless, and non-jiggling except for breasts, with clothing seen only in porn or in the bedroom a decade ago. But now the lack of clothing is not just normalized, but expected, as shown here in the 2023 Oscars after party. But clothing signifies power, and the difference between the expectation for females and males is apparent. Notice here the fully suited men at that same after party. It's important to note that clothing and being clothed denotes power and the power differential. Highlighted here is meaningful for society and the millions of kids watching and emulating their favorite stars. An intro, the naked dress from this year's many red carpets. But no naked suits, and the controversial Kanye West Bianca drop the coat stunt that highlights the exact power control dynamic I referred to a few slides earlier. And the culture does let others in if they look like Rihanna, Beyonce, or Nicki Minaj. But when they do, women of color are often depicted as wild animals, beasts to be tamed. And this shows up in mainstream as well as porn culture. The sexualized racism of women of color promotes racist images, feeding stereotypes and racist ideology. What it says to young girls, with boys taking great notice, is that they have two choices: conformity with this hypersexualized culture, what Dr. Gail Dines, our president and CEO of Culture Reframed, terms fuckability, or invisibility. Teens have it built into their DNA, the need to escape invisibility and be seen. This coercion into a sexuality that they did not invent nor decide because there are so few choices. Real choice would mean there are lots of choices offered. It makes no sense to call conformity to our culture a choice. The American Psychological Association released their most downloaded report on hypersexualized culture, where they reported a key finding that girls are learning to self-objectify. right? So the culture does this for them, but they're also self-objectifying, which leads to increased levels of anxiety, depression, body loathing, risky sexual behavior, early pregnancy and STDs, suicidal ideation and self-harm, dropping out of school, and sexual victimization. So at Culture Reframed, we commissioned the authors to follow up on this report 10 years later. And unfortunately, they found the same or higher levels of hypersexualization among girls and boys with the same devastating consequences. That white paper is available on our website. So, what does it mean to be a young person, but especially a young girl in this culture today? Dr. Gail Dines interviewed a child rapist a few years ago who was incarcerated for raping his 12-year-old stepdaughter. He explained the grooming process where he honed in on the victim, his stepdaughter. He developed a relationship with her, told her what really matters is how hot and sexy she looked. And now she's bonded with him and begins to believe that the most important thing about herself is her appearance as sexy. He said, "The culture did a lot of the grooming for me. The industry is creating a culture who is mass perpetrating against our kids." Basically, porn is everywhere. This is what one teen told researchers writing a report on kids and porn for the Office of the Children's Commissioner in England. The reality is that most young people will inevitably be exposed to porn. 1 in 3 kids say that they've seen explicit, hardcore porn by age 12, which in the US equates to roughly 25 million children. In the majority of cases, they've stumbled upon it accidentally. So we have to talk about it. Hypersexualized and pornified images do seem to be everywhere. They're used to advertise so many things. These are for perfume and clothing. The Dolce & Gabbana ad at the bottom there, depicting gang rape, ran for 8 months on social media platforms like Meta before finally being taken down. This one is selling milk, and the other, sandwiches at a local fast food chain. And if that doesn't scream eat subs, I don't know what does. So I'd now like to take a look at one of the major players in the sex sells industries, social media. These stats are out of the US, but are representative in most industrialized countries, including the UK. So we know 90% of teens aged 13 through 17 use social media. 75% of them have at least one social media profile, and over half of them are visiting social media sites at least once a day. And the average amount of time that teens are spending connected to the internet is 9 hours. And this is a stat that's post-COVID. So still 9 hours on the internet. Research is really mixed when it comes to social media. Some benefits that some researchers highlight is, of course, increased socialization. Kids can practice communication skills from a very young age, even 2. Identity development and self-expression, access to supports, especially with our LGBTQ youth and those youth that are in rural areas. Kids can stay up to date, and they can also take action and practice social media activism. However, physician and former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says that 13 is not old enough to be on social media. And the research that he is highlighting is this research, the research that shows that increased social media use can lead to decreased productivity, isolation, a lack of privacy. We see tons of studies on cyberbullying, stress and depression, often caused by false connections and unrealistic expectations. And those sleep studies are pretty amazing when it comes to sleep, teens, and social media. Looking at the quality, not necessarily quantity, but the quality of sleep when kids are on phones or connected devices as they're trying to get a good night's sleep. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to take you through some of the most popular social media platforms among youth today. And please note that for each of these platforms, the minimum age requirements is still 13. 90% of 13 to 24-year-olds use Snapchat, right? This photo sharing platform. They spend about 25 to 30 minutes per day sending snaps or photos that disappear in seconds after being viewed. Snap was originally marketed as an app called Peekaboo to send and receive nude pictures, and it hasn't veered far from that because most kids today call it the sexting app. The defining feature is the filter, the ability to transform a 10-year-old into a 20-something in seconds. Safety concerns are that, obviously, and also in the real-time snap map that exposes your kids' locations, and the snap streaks, where young people qualify their sense of self through their quantity of streaks that they can keep. Next, we have Instagram, another photo sharing app where you can post videos, reels, and stories now. Close to 90% of teens are spending an average of 50 to 60 minutes per day on this platform, often scrolling through images of idealized lives and comparing themselves to others. We know that the average teen has 5 Finstas, or fake Instagram accounts, but it's not always what you think. Teens create Finstas to post more authentic versions of themselves to a smaller group of friends and family. These accounts, though, are still at risk of exposure, cyberbullying, and dangerous connections. We also see a safety risk exposed by Collective Shout, a nonprofit charity in Australia, who conducted a 15-month investigation of the sexualization of girls on Instagram. They found hundreds of images of underage, hypersexualized girls like Bella posed here on a bar, holding on to what we can assume is a dancing pole. Once users verified that Bella was 10 years old, the very next comment circled there in red is, "Please open your legs." Collective Shout sent these and hundreds of other images and user comments like this to Instagram, and Instagram came back and said none of them were found to violate their community guidelines. So then we move from photo sharing, basically photo sharing platforms, to video sharing. And TikTok is the #1 global app used by teens today. Dr. Elaine Casket, a UK psychologist who has extensively researched social media, calls TikTok and overt sexualization a supercharged catnip for teens. Teenagers are naturally interested in taking risks, in finding out about sex and discovering themselves as sexual beings. They are open to flattery, seduction, and to the verification that they receive from the hearts and likes that they get. Combining an adolescent desire for approval with a global digital platform can massively soup up girls' encouragement to post sexual content. For example, the Silhouette Challenge started as a body positive movement and was a call for young women to celebrate their bodies. But almost as soon as it went viral, some started sharing tips and tutorials to remove the red filter, to expose people's naked bodies without their consent. And these images were often put on third-party platform porn sites. Then we have YouTube. YouTube is the most used digital video platform in the US, and it's a close second in the UK. We're often asked about the safer version of YouTube, which is YouTube Kids. Well, in our own investigation, we found channels like the one displayed here dedicated to turning popular US children's cartoons like Bubble Guppies into overtly sexualized and pornified recreations. Bubble Guppies is about a group of merperson preschoolers who work together to solve everyday problems. Well, this channel, Aries Kids TV, has taken the main character, Molly, and dropping her gills, gave her legs, put her on stage, and she's dancing on a pole. This entire channel is marketed to kids, yet features nude dancing and orgies within 3 minutes of the video. 1 in 4 members of Gen Z want to become social media influencers who make millions of dollars through brand sponsorships and advertisements. Ella Kosmovic from Belgium was 8 in April 2020 when she did a video on TikTok that has now gotten close to 10 million views. She puts out a couple new videos a week, emulating influencers like Addison Rae. She now has a worldwide audience with 100 million views on YouTube. In the middle there is Ryan Kaji. He was 12 years old in October of 2023, and he is the creator of Ryan's World. He has 45 billion views on YouTube and is worth over $100 million. And then finally, Naya White. She's 10, pictured here at Sephora, with 40,000 followers and 6 million views on her social media platforms. She's part of Gen Alpha's obsession with skincare that feeds the $164 billion global skincare industry and produces 10-year-old skinfluencers. We often get the absolutely shocked look on the faces of adults in our audiences after these slides with the common question, who is letting this happen? Unfortunately, many times we have to look no further than the parents who are managing their kiddos on these platforms and sometimes knowingly exposing them to dangers, such as those interviewed in this New York Times piece, where one mom sells her 11-year-old daughter's photos and her used panties, but proclaims that these creeps don't know where we live or anything. Living in this like me, watch me, look at me culture has done a number on young people. Research has documented the negative effects of the comparison factor of social media, citing increased depression, decreased well-being and self-esteem, leading to poor body image and eating disorders for both girls and boys. And now I'd like to move into the world of gaming. There are over 3 billion gamers worldwide, and 76% of them are under the age of 18. Tweens and teens are spending close to an hour and a half per day gaming. Now, the hypersexualization of female characters in video games has been well researched for decades, as seen in Grand Theft Auto. And again, this is marketed for over 17-year-olds, but can be accessed by younger kids. And this is where you can buy a prostituted woman and get extra points for murdering her, but is nevertheless continuing today. Rockstar Games, who produces Grand Theft Auto, with its promo video of a woman of color in tiger print twerking on a car and being grabbed by men inside, confirms a sex robot warehouse in Grand Theft Auto 6. And it also says on its promo, this is not family friendly, which is set for release this summer as soon as our kiddos are out of school. But we see a new trend in gaming in that sexualization is increasing in games specifically marketed to young children, like Fortnite, Minecraft, and Roblox. And these are games played by children as young as 6. Minecraft is a sandbox game. This means it's a virtual land where users can create their own world. Players use building blocks and mostly their own imagination and creativity. Now there are Minecraft sex mods, which are modifications to the game where you can remove all the clothing from your avatar and create and invite people to your sex scenes in bedrooms. And then we move to Roblox. Roblox is now a major metaverse platform. After a presentation I had given to parents, a concerned dad walks up to the stage and nervously asked me to look into Roblox condos. So I did, but so did the BBC. And they wrote, a naked man wearing just a dog collar and a lead is led across the floor by a woman in a bondage outfit. 2 strippers dance next to a bar. A group is gathered around a couple openly having sex, watching and occasionally commenting. One man is wearing a Nazi uniform. This isn't happening in the real world. It's taking place on a children's gaming platform. Again, this is a children's gaming platform that is played by kids all across the world, often on their school-issued devices. But without moderation, adults can interact with children in these created situations. The fact is, we are socialized through pulp culture media. The major form of sex ed today for young people is pornography, and they have to search no further than their social media platforms to find it. The intersection of these industries is totally evident. Going back to that Details magazine article where they interviewed pornographer Joanna Angel, she said, there is an entire generation of young people who think sex ends with a money shot to the face. Why? How? How have we gotten to the place where young people think that sex ends with welcome ejaculation on the face of a girl? Porn. That's how. That's how we got here. And some say that there's always been porn. And they're right. But there hasn't always been a porn industry, and that makes all the difference. So the domestication of the internet in the early 2000s made porn more affordable. How much more affordable than free can you get? It made it more accessible so anyone with an internet connection can access. And it made it more anonymous, right? There's no verification, there's no ID, there's no way that you have to put your real name into porn sites. And these things, affordability, accessibility, and anonymity, are the three major drivers of online porn demand. Just to show you how big the industry is, porn sites get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. In fact, 30% of all data transferred across the internet is porn. YouPorn, one of the larger video porn sites, streams 6 times the bandwidth as Hulu. Again, a little bit of the numbers. We have 40 million Americans who are regular visitors to porn sites, and this is indicative of most westernized countries. About a quarter of search engine requests are porn related, with 35% of all internet downloads being pornographic. And the average age of first internet porn exposure is between 9 and 11. And we have studies that show that this is getting younger and younger. And our anecdotal evidence from frontline child protection professionals are saying this exposure is happening as young as 4, 5, and 6 years old. Researchers from Indiana University in the US revealed a parental naivete gap. And this is something that we're constantly battling when it comes to parents taking this issue seriously. And it's partly because they don't believe that their kids are watching porn. This research study showed that half as many parents thought their 14 and 18-year-olds had watched porn as in fact seen it. And depending on the sex act, parents are underestimating what their kids are seeing by as much as 10 times. And what are they seeing? Well, we can confirm that there is no more softcore porn. It has totally migrated into pop culture. So we are left with predominantly hardcore, often violent, degrading, and extreme scenarios. And it's really important to remember from media studies that we don't just see images, we ingest them, and then we learn from them. So this is the gold standard study from Anna Bridges and her colleagues. They analyzed the 304 scenes, and they found that 90% contained at least one aggressive act if both physical and verbal aggression were combined. And her team is set to release new research this year and did this same study that analyzed the most popular porn sites with the most popular, most viewed porn scenes. And they found that that number is now 100%. So 100% of the most popular downloaded or watched pornography on online porn sites contains verbal and physical aggression. And I want to give you a trigger warning for the next few slides because I'm going to talk about what we do see, what the violence is. And it's important to know as adults that this isn't your father's Playboy. So what we are seeing now in mainstream pornography is more of what is depicted as gonzo porn, that brutal, dehumanizing, body-punishing pornography, where the number one act is gagging, oftentimes with a penis, sometimes to the point of vomiting, which is a visual documentation of choking. Next, we see strangulation, which we're going to talk about some of that research, rough anal sex, ejaculation and spitting on the face, which has been referred to earlier, hair pulling, name calling, and spanking. So the industry message here is that this is the kind of violence that will make you a real man, that the more you can debase and dehumanize women, the hotter the sex. And the harms of pornography viewing and consumption have been well documented, which we'll get to soon. So this is copy taken from a website called Gag Me, Then F Me. Do you know what we say to things like romance and foreplay? We say F off. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. We make them gag till their makeup starts running, and then we give them the sticky bath. So this is taken directly from a porn site that oftentimes when young kids 10, 11, 12 put into Google boobies or butts, they might think that they are going to see what they hope to see, boobies or butts, right? Maybe a naked woman, but they would never think that they were going to be catapulted into such violence as this. And we have to really take a look at how sly the industry is. They said, we do what every man would really like to do. And what they are ending up doing by this is they're hijacking these boys' sexual scripts by telling them what they should be doing. And in turn, this creates a population of victimized girls and other boys. So what we should say to the industry is, no, they don't want to do this. There are many men out there that don't want this. Don't tell us what our boys and then what our young people should want to do, right? By hijacking their sexual scripts. So, Billie Eilish's interview on the Howard Stern show of all places a few years back is the most recent declaration of the impact of pornography from a cultural influencer or celebrity. She says, I started watching porn when I was like 11. I think it really destroyed my brain, and I feel incredibly devastated that I was exposed to so much porn. Well, Billie is right. Numerous studies about brain myelination and frontal lobe processing shows dramatic changes in the brain caused by porn exposure. And this is ever more important when we are looking at the developing brains in adolescence, knowing that the prefrontal cortex is not even fully matured until age 25. So just as the tobacco industry argued for decades that there was no proven connection between smoking and lung cancer, so too has the porn industry denied the existence of more than 40 years of empirical research on the impact of its products. There are so many behavioral risks when it comes to porn exposure. We see sexual intercourse at younger ages, higher numbers of partners and casual sex partners, and engagement in risky and casual sex. And here, researchers define risky sex as unprotected sex and sex with lots of casual sex partners. Medical professionals are also reporting increasing cases of erectile dysfunction in males as young as 14. They're also presenting with low libido, difficulty orgasming, and they're talking about a preference for pornography over actual sex with a partner. We see increased levels of physical and or verbal violence against women in increased sexting, negative gender attitudes, sexual aggression, and sexual coercion. And Peggy Orenstein wrote this guest essay in the New York Times about Debbie Herbenick's research. She's an Indiana University researcher who's taken a look at a troubling trend in teenage sex, which is sexual strangulation. In the study, young women reported, 2/3 of young women reported that they have been choked or strangled during sex, and 1/3 in their most recent sexual encounter. This increased 40% for those who said they were between the ages of 12 and 17 the first time that this happened. Strangulation leaves few visible marks and can be easily overlooked as a cause of death. Those who have been strangled rarely seek medical attention because their injuries seem so minor. They might have lightheadedness, headaches, neck pain, temporary loss of coordination, and ear ringing. The true effects are silent, potentially not showing up for days, weeks, and even years. The American Academy of Neurology says that restricting blood flow to the brain, even briefly, can cause permanent injury, including stroke and cognitive impairment. And that traumatic brain injury research is so important here. Non-fatal strangulation, one of the most significant indicators that a man will murder his female partner. Strangulation is also one of the most common methods used for doing so, has somehow been eroticized and made consensual, at least consensual enough, yet the outcomes are largely the same. We also see a causal relationship in boys who are seeking out porn, who are intentionally seeking out porn. They are more likely to want to try out what they have seen and more likely to sexually harass. They're 6 times more likely to self-report sexually aggressive behavior and over 3 times more likely to actually engage in problematic sexual behavior. We also see tons of psychological and mental health risks from porn exposure, such as risky consensual sexual scripts, where we see increased objectified notions of women and sexism, the creation of a disintegrated, inauthentic sexual identity, and real alienation from self and others, with the avoidance of emotion that limits the capacity for empathy. We're also seeing the being undermined, the self-awareness, self-regulation, and impulse control. Poor body image and low self-esteem reported by both boys and girls, but specifically girls aged 10 through 13 are reporting higher levels of body surveillance and body shame than those with low levels of internalized sexualization, which then in turns predicts poor body image as well as depression and anxiety. The request for labiaplasty specifically has increased by 80% over a 2-year period in under 18-year-old girls. And there's been increases in boys' negative preoccupation with the appearance of their body and body ideals implicitly promoted by the male pornography industry. We have also done research on groups especially at risk to the harms of pornography, and this research is detailed in a white paper available on our website. So those groups include those in the LGBTQ plus communities, those who are neurodivergent, in foster care, who are differently abled, who have histories of sexual abuse, and a cluster of the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. So, and these are also the groups of kids that the porn industry targets the most. So one of the things about today's market, porn and the extreme market, the gonzo market, is that so many of the fans want to see so much more extreme stuff. So this quote was taken from the Adult Video News magazine by a pornographer for Jules Jordan back in January of 2003. Over 20 years ago, Jules Jordan was saying, people want to see more extreme stuff. We just need to keep getting more extreme. So in order to maximize user engagement, Pornhub has vowed to add more extreme content, even when their own terms of service prohibits it. So 20 years ago, we were asking, how much more extreme can this industry get short of killing women or showing snuff films? So what we have found is a little shocking. This is now the trend or the extreme in online porn. Children. So childified image in porn is showing up everywhere. And these childified images are young girls that are meant to look young. So do we know that this young girl is 18? We don't know, and neither does the user, right? They have prepubescent body types, small breasts, hair in pigtails, wearing minimal makeup. So this is nothing like the porn performer of the past, right? They are often dressed in school uniforms with bobby socks and Mary Janes. They have no pubic hair, which is a non-distinguishing feature today because of porn, but they're also positioned in rooms that make them look like it's a child's bedroom with princesses and Disney characters abound. So we looked at this trend and we looked at Pornhub as one of the world's leading free porn sites, and we found hundreds of childified Pornhub categories. Now, these categories in and of themselves, along with the thousands of videos within them, so that shows how many videos are within these categories, they serve to normalize grooming, adult on child sex, and incest, and the sexual victimization of young girls and boys. So when you add all of these up, especially the step, the teen categories, the babysitter categories, the solo female categories. This is just where you hear a male voice behind the camera coaching the young girl, which is like grooming. When you add all of these up, you get real proof that this is the way the industry is moving toward the childification of porn. So when we're moving from porn to the playground, we see anecdotal evidence from frontline child protection experts on child-to-child sexual abuse, where they are reporting that the age of the initiator, they are using the initiator because it's hard to call a child a perpetrator of sexual violence, but the age of the initiator is getting younger, moving from 14 to 18 to 11 to 15. The age of the victim is getting younger, moving from 8 to 11 to 4 to 8. And they're seeing porn-themed acts such as name-calling, hair-pulling, biting, strangulation, and anal penetration. Does this look familiar? It's just so it's like a light bulb effect goes off when we speak to these child protection agencies and child advocacy centers. They are wondering, why are they seeing this type of brutal violence? Where is this coming from? And it's totally coming from pornography. In the past, we could reliably assume that the perpetrator or the initiator of these sexual assaults was sexually abused. But now, child initiators report seeing pornography and wanting to try these things out. The sexual abuse is increasingly violent and filmed by the abusers. And high school boys who are frequent users of porn are more likely to buy sex than those who are not. So we're at the point where that's a ton of information. It seems like there is, we kind of just want to cry, scream, or think that there's nothing that can be done about it. But we know that we can change this toxic culture. We can use our own culture to reframe it and change it, because we believe that young people deserve a sexuality that is authentically theirs, that grows out of who they are, that they themselves author, and not the porn industry. So at Culture Reframed, we are envisioning a world based on equity and empathy, free from the harms of hypersexualized media and porn culture. So we work on an all systems level. On a macro level, we are supporting governmental legislation and regulation that enforces age verification for both the production and the consumption of pornography, and that holds porn sites responsible and accountable for the violence done to women and children. We work on that meso level to provide education and training to schools, communities, child protection, and health agencies. And on the micro level, we're focusing awareness and education on individuals, families, and caregivers. So we view pornography as a stealth public health crisis for children because of its pervasive nature as a societal problem. And this is why, instead of a moral approach or a religious approach, we are taking a public health, science-based framework to this issue, as porn undermines the social, emotional, cognitive, and physical health and well-being of individuals, families, and communities. We center our work around young people and those trusted adults who can help them build resilience and resistance to hypersexualized media and porn by becoming knowledgeable, skilled, and confident in having necessary conversations. So we are very interested in building partnerships to provide ongoing research-based education to help these agencies and organizations connect the dots. We are really focusing on a kid-centered, trauma-informed approach to help inform best practices and processes, and building a support network with families to provide resources. Numerous studies show that most adolescents consider their parents and caregivers a helpful source of information regarding sex education. Research shows that this group of people are key protective factors that, when having these conversations, will significantly reduce risky behaviors in tweens and teens. Kids are eager to have open, honest conversations, and we can't leave it up to the multi-billion-dollar porn industry to protect these kids. We have developed online courses to help adults navigate this tricky terrain. They are research-driven and age-based. They are full of educational resources so that you can spend 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 weeks going through it from start to finish. So it's chock full of information, bolstered by educational videos and resources, as well as guided conversation scripts. And did I mention they're free? We have 2 programs for parents. One is aimed for parents of tweens with kids aged 9 through 12, and the other is for parents of teens, kids aged 13 through 17. And we focus on these really important topics such as boundaries, consent and privacy, how to manage tech, navigating online and offline relationships and friendships, and how to lead discussions skillfully. In the teens program, we're looking at all of those physical, emotional, and cognitive changes that are happening with your teens. Healthy relationships, how to have them, what could be toxic about masculinity, and how we can work towards a healthier vision of masculinity. Sexting in the digital footprint is one of our most downloaded modules because this is something schools are really taking an interest in as well. And predators, human trafficking, and safety. We say it's never too late or never too early to start the conversation. We think it's really important to scaffold the information by correctly naming body parts, setting body boundaries, and discussing consent at any age. And just being present, right? Watching for these warning signs. And these warning signs may look different for children depending on their age and stage. So if they're withdrawing from family, peers, and activities, if they're closing their device as soon as you enter the room, I say they might be planning a surprise party for you, but most often they're probably not wanting you to see what's on their device. So it's time to check in. It's time to have the conversation. If they're spending excessive amounts of time in the bathroom and they don't have a medical issue, especially if they're taking their connected device with them, we need to talk about that. Family and parents should know who online and offline friends are. If they're being really secretive, if they don't want you to know, if they can't answer basic questions about who their friends are, we need to investigate a little bit more. Pay attention to the lack of sleep, and not just the quantity, the quality of sleep. If the kids are getting up, and a golden rule is not to have a device in the bedroom, right? If they start using precocious sexual language, this is a warning sign that they might be hearing this from someone else. It could be a Jack Harlow song, which gives us a really good leeway into asking questions about what that means to choke someone during sex, or why we feel compelled to follow TikTok videos that promote that. Also, mood shifts, depression, and anxiety are something to keep an eye out for. We think it's really important to practice these conversation scripts to get comfortable and having those uncomfortable conversations. We believe it's better to have 100 one-minute conversations than the dreaded 100-minute lecture. The goal is to show that you are available to provide accurate information, to relay your values and perspective, and to talk about all of these things that kids are going through today. We also subscribe to the wait until eighth movement. So the wait until eighth grade to give a smartphone to your kiddo. So that ends up being about 14. We have a family tech guide and a customizable social media and phone agreement. This is a great time if you're thinking about giving your 10-year-old a phone, or allowing your 13-year-old on Snapchat or Instagram. It would be a great time to talk about what this agreement looks like. I have your passwords. I'm going to check on your phone. It's not about trust. It's about safety. Also, we are very excited that we have launched the Porn Critical Sex Education curriculum last year. We were approached by educators in the UK who said that, sex education is mandatory now in the UK, but we are seeing a lack of porn critical education. So we worked with educators in the UK and in the US and developed this sex ed curriculum. It has an anti-exploitation framework with training modules for educators. It has a digital media literacy component. There is tons of resources in this curriculum that is beneficial to parents also, to extend their knowledge and to get even more tips, especially the digital media literacy sessions. It's customizable, comprehensive, and free. So if you scan that QR code, then it'll take you directly to the sign-up page for that. We found out that talking matters, right? When working with frontline professionals, we need to use a kid-centered, trauma-informed approach, using the terms that kids use, never introducing the names of porn sites, right? And entering the conversation through devices, right? Do you have a phone? Do you game? What do you do when you're in those online spaces? And then that opens up a whole world, the world of kids for parents and professionals to start talking about porn exposure. Finally, we have resources for child-serving professionals. We just launched this about 2 months ago that addresses the increasing child-to-child sexual abuse that we were seeing in this country and in Europe, especially in the UK. We have 30 experts from the US and in the UK who got together and created informational fact sheets, videos, screening tools, and conversation scripts that are available for training child-serving professionals. That's available now. Scan that QR code. It's all free. So feel free to use it. So finally, our call to action to you is to access and share this information, talk about it, sign up at our newsletter. We send a monthly newsletter out to let you know what our small but mighty team is doing, both nationally in the US and internationally. So feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. Also, as promised, there is the website, culturereframed.org. You can find those white papers that I talked about, all the courses that are free and the resources that we have. And my personal email address, asanchez@culturereframed.org. In case we don't get to the questions that you asked today, feel free to email me any questions that you have, comments, feedback, anything. I'd like to talk to you. And finally, just a word of caution that if we don't talk to kids about pornography, we can guarantee that this multi-billion-dollar predatory industry will. And through this presentation, we know what they're going to say. I mean, they've said it loud and clear, and they continue to say it. So we must be educated, and we must have this conversation.
If there aren't any questions from the people who are here, it might be because they feel a little bit like me, a bit speechless, actually.
Yeah.
What you do is so incredibly important. That's all I've been thinking on a loop the whole way through, absorbing all those statistics. Zach has a question, and I do as well, Mandy. But yeah.
Okay.
Zach's for you. Right. While Zach's typing that, can I ask you my question?
Yes, of course.
So you were talking about kidfluencers, which is quite chilling, isn't it, to think that parents would exploit their children online effectively for their own financial gain. I mean, it must be.
Right.
Or some warped sense of gaining popularity. It just seems really troubling on many levels.
Right.
In the UK, there was, although it's shifting now, thankfully, because it was a little bit over-egged, a digital rights approach, that they have a right to social media, that they have a right to access this technology, and that we shouldn't really be taking it away from them. That thankfully is starting to shift because it's clearly not safe really for children under a certain age. But I was hearing, and I don't know how much detail I've absorbed from this, that are they starting to find legislation around parents of kidfluencers now that they have to give them a certain amount of financial turnover? Or I mean, is this slowly coming to the forefront, just how corrupting it is of childhood? Because this certainly is a breach of child rights, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that you said the key word, it's slowly coming. It's slowly coming in. And that's something we've seen this in the media industry in terms of child actors. So we have rights for child actors. And this is something that, in LA, we've seen that legislation come, and there's child labor laws, and there's, a certain amount has to be put away for kids who are making this money. But there's nothing quite comparable to social media. And so we're very slow to catch up with with exploiting children for labor purposes, and what happens when they're making $100,000 to $500,000 a day on social media. What happens to that money? Who gets the chunk of it? But then also, there's been some documentaries released recently. Bad Influencing is one of them. That's a Netflix documentary that exposes this exact thing, where it was saying, these kids were working 12, 14 hours a day, not going to school, hardly eating, hardly sleeping, being forced into situations at 10, 11, 12 that 10, 11, 12-year-olds shouldn't be forced into in terms of relationships and having their first kiss on screen. And the parents were largely the ones that were filming and giving consent to film and being, this idea of YouTube stars, right? This is kind of where this came from. So I think we're seeing it, but it's slow, especially here in the US.
And do you think it might make its way into safeguarding protocols? Because it should really be
It should.
something that involves the social services or social care, as we call it, especially
Absolutely.
in the situation you've just described. That's terrible.
Yes.
And I do.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Mandy.
No, absolutely. It definitely, all of those issues bring up child safeguarding issues. So definitely needs to be in that protocol.
And the younger girls with the makeup and they become sexualized just with the way their makeup is put on at too young an age. Do you think that's a window into the sex industry or makes them more at risk? Is that being observed?
Absolutely. It was something that I just kind of fell into this idea of skinfluencers, because the idea of kidfluencers was, in the last couple of years, I've really been researching that. But looking at how big brands like Sephora and Ulta were profiting off of these young, 9 and 10-year-olds having a 9-step skincare routine, where a pediatric dermatologist is saying chemical peels are so dangerous for a 9-year-old skin. Like, this can't be okay, this can't be okay. And then parents are flooding these brands and buying lots of money, and then they get sponsored by the brands, and so there's dangerous, there's dangerous physical issues, but then the hypersexualization is apparent, where we see these young girls who aren't able to show skin on certain platforms are moving into a direct line into an OnlyFans platform or another platform where they can monetize and sell their content there.
Absolutely. I was just thinking OnlyFans. There's far too many British youngsters on OnlyFans as well. We've got a GP actually who now works in child and adolescent mental health is asking, do you think the Online Safety Act will actually make a difference to this, and will age verification actually be needed? So the Online Safety Act is our UK legislation, which Ofcom is the main regulator, and it really relies on effective age verification, really, of which we're not really sure it's working yet. But how important is that in this?
I say it's very important. I know that some people think, well, is it really going to make a difference? And I think if we had that attitude, then we'd kind of just throw up our hands and say, well, nothing works, and let them be unregulated. Like the porn industry and now the social media industry is the only unregulated multi-billion-dollar industry in the world. We wouldn't allow big tobacco to be unregulated, or they would be selling cigarettes outside of middle schools and grade schools and primary schools. We wouldn't allow those things to happen. So, I mean, we have to enforce some type of regulation. So we totally support age verification at a minimum level. And even in this country, we're talking about not necessarily on social media sites, which is definitely needed, just on porn sites, right? Just don't let kids into porn sites. Now you can you just check a box and say that you're 18. Like, it can't be that easy, right? Before we had online porn, you had to drive to a porn store and get an ID, right? And show your ID. And then they checked and verified your ID, right? It made it a little bit more difficult to get porn. But now with online, it's like the wild, wild west. There's no regulation. So any amount of regulation is going to be helpful, but conversations with kids and digital media literacy with kids is going to be, we can't couple that. I mean, we can't just put a Band-Aid on a broken arm, right? This is a broken arm situation. We also have to provide conversation.
Absolutely. There's that gap there, isn't that vortex? There has been some major changes to how porn industries are going to be regulated in the UK. So watch that space, see if we actually succeed there. Right. So GP is asking here, as a parent, it would seem that the take-home message is to be aware, be open, have those conversations. Have I got that right? For doctors, professionals, is there a take-home for us, especially with regards to safeguarding?
Yes, absolutely. I think the biggest take home there is also the same thing. We have spoken to tens of thousands of pediatricians whose faces were like, "What? Porn?" Like and had no clue as to the effects of pornography on kids. And oftentimes when we ask pediatricians on a well child visit, do you ask about porn exposure? Do you ask about are there things that you could be asking about? Because in the US especially, we ask about mental health and we ask, are you being hurt at home and things like that. But tiny little questions about porn exposure can open up a whole world of issues for kids. And I think just that too, being educated and really kind of having the guts to be the one that does that, to be the one that changes the face of how we provide care and services in the medical world is really important.
It's so important, Mandy. And I just think about our child and adolescent consultations. If we're
Hmm.
talking about young girls, especially as young as 7, 8, 9,
Yep.
we
Yep.
should really be talking about this a lot more than we are, even if
Absolutely.
parents are at least 10 times
Yeah.
the dark
Yeah.
from where they should be. What you're
Right.
saying,
Right.
it's our job, isn't it, to turn the lights on and
Yep.
ask. But
Yep.
wow, it's quite something. So actually, looking at your information around conversations, there's no reason why us as doctors can't use those turns of phrases in
Yep.
consultations because it's still pretty sticky for us. It's like
Hmm.
hard work to get that in the
Yeah.
conversation, but so important.
Right.
We've got a pediatric doctor here saying, amazing talk, Mandy. So extremely important to discuss. Thank you. My question, how much support does the medical profession give to porn concerns at the moment, do you think?
I would say not as much. We're seeing a change. Like Dr. Dines spoke to the American Academy of Pediatrics a few years back. A room 30,000 pediatricians were sitting there, and jaws just dropped. And it was just
I feel like
faces
that.
were white. And the idea that you're coming into contact with kids, kids that are exposed every day possibly and could be that front line of defense, could be the one that hands a parent a one pager that says, hey, talk to your kid about this, or talk to me about how to talk to your kid about this, like there's got to be that space. So I do think that the medical profession is coming along slowly, but more work needs to be done. And I am just so grateful that we can speak to those in the medical profession to really educate about this, about the harms, because once you can't unknow, right? Once you feel this obligation, and I think that's we know that we're here to protect kids, and so if a conversation does that, then that seems pretty easy to me.
And in terms of parents that are living in the dark, and I suspect most parents are, how do you reach them, Mandy? Because I suspect there's many that need you who won't know of your existence yet, but we're going to try very
Mhm.
hard in the UK to
Yeah,
change that. But
yeah.
does it ever land very badly? Are there tightropes you have to walk? What's your advice?
Yeah, and it's really interesting when sex ed is such a politically divisive topic in the United States. We don't have mandatory sex ed in most states. It's a state by state basis, and even when you do, it's not comprehensive. And even if it's comprehensive, we might not be talking about porn. So it gets tricky sometimes, but I think that people trust Culture Reframed because we're not shaming or blaming parents, right? We're not on some moral high horse. We're not religiously affiliated. We're not politically affiliated. So we're able to bring the science to people. We're able to speak truth to power. We're able to talk about how it's, this is the fact. Here are the facts. We can't hide our heads anymore. We're not going to blame you for, not knowing, but now that you know, we need to do something, right? We need to act. And I think that parenting is one of the hardest jobs ever. And so we say we exist to kind of hold your hand through that. You're not meant to also be porn experts. So let us educate you, gain some confidence here, and let's talk to kids. Let's hear what they have to say because they will talk to they will talk to you if you provide the space.
That's reassuring, and it kind of fits with other scenarios, I suppose, like breaking bad news or having
Mhm.
difficult consultations. I mean, we should be able to cope with it, but it's just the most appalling thing that none of us really want to believe is happening, I think, as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's devastating, isn't it?
And it's so much better to be proactive than reactive. We get calls from concerned parents, and school districts are really reaching out to us lately saying, we've got a major problem here. We've got a major problem with kids sending nude photos, and they're not understanding that this is technically, CSAM. These are child sexual abuse images and materials, and they're sending this back and forth. And we have laws against that, and so no one's really sure what to do. And when you say have a conversation, it seems so flip, or it just seems so easy to do. But it is just that. It is just easy to provide this media literacy, to have kids be critical consumers of what they are consuming. If you're going to be out there, we know you're going to be exposed. So let's have you have the tools to be critical consumers, and we can provide that. That's easy to do in a 1 minute conversation, repeatedly over and over, not this huge sex talk lecture. We don't have to do. And I think that parents get, they breathe in a sigh of relief when they're like, okay, I don't have to give that big, huge talk. I can give these little snippets. Like I can use social media. I can use the VMA, the Video Music Awards. I can use this Jack Harlow song and talk about the lyrics of this song and how, why would kids want to strangle eat? I mean, my kiddo was asking me that. Why do kids want to do that? And we have to be able to talk about it, and we have to say, we're uncomfortable. Maybe, our parents didn't talk to us about this, and we didn't grow up in this world, but we kind of created it for you. This is the world that was created by adults, and you're now swimming in it. So we have to provide that life raft for you.
That's so true and important. And I love the 1 versus 100. So 100
Yeah.
little low stakes, quick chats rather than the
Yep.
dreaded lecture.
The big one.
Brilliant
Yeah.
advice. And it's great actually when you're speaking to parents and patients, those kind of small,
Right.
high impact chats. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your talk, when you were mentioning about the adults there, that leads into another question very neatly, actually.
Mhm.
Because you do talk to parents and children, don't you? So
Yep.
concerns around children's consumption seem like a more straightforward campaign than adult consumption of porn. What is your approach to reduce or make less extreme adult consumption?
Yeah. So as an organization, we are specifically focused on kids and kids consumption. We typically don't, we know the research around that. We can talk about adult consumption and what that leads to, and young people's consumption lead into that. But we're specifically focusing on kids consumption. But we would say that porn is porn, right? And we would say no, regardless, right? Because of the effects the devastating effects that it has, not only on children, but also on adults. And if we consider adults 18 and up, we know that prefrontal cortex isn't developed until 25. So we're dealing with young adults too. So we do a lot of talks in universities, and we're talking with a lot of young people who just porn is the wallpaper of their life, right? And this is just, they have porn parties. I did a lecture
What?
with a fraternity at a big Midwestern university here in the States, and they were talking about porn is just shown ongoing at parties, and they'll just have porn parties, and it's this mix of young kids under the age of 25, alcohol, party culture, and porn, right? And then you get that all mixed together, and we wonder why there's such high rates of sexual assault and violence on college campuses. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 20 men, on college campuses are experiencing sexual assault every year. And so we have to talk about it there as well, especially with our young adults.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, this is why your organization is so important because it's a life raft, really, because there'll be so many families in silent distress, not
Yeah.
knowing what to say, not knowing who to ask, not knowing
Mhm.
how to even start the conversation.
Right.
Oh, Mandy, what an amazing talk. Honestly, it's just been utterly brilliant, and we've got to get you back. Phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yes, Helen, one of our brilliant GP members, says phenomenal talk. Thank you so much. The comments are great, Mandy. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. We will be sharing your talk. I know lots of us are going to want to watch this far and wide. And it's very brilliant messaging. And the fact that we can access your resources for free is even better, Mandy.
Yes,
so thank you
please do.
so much on behalf of all of us, and we will get you back.
Yes, yes, thank you. I'll come back anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.